Well, let's share a word of prayer. Gracious and holy God, on this beautiful morning, we come to you to seek your guidance in our lives and to flesh out what your message is in your holy scripture. We ask, O Lord, that as we gather, that we may do so with minds that are receptive to the power of your Holy Spirit, that you allow us to open up in such a way that the Spirit can guide us in all of our conversation and then can go with us as we leave this place to apply your word in our daily lives. Bless and keep all of those who are in need this day. Grant that they may find your blessings overflowing upon them, and that we as your people might indeed be able to reach out to those in need and offer to be the hands and feet of Christ in their lives. For we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We're on chapter 4, and one of the things that came up for me, there are two stories in chapter 4. One is Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman, and then there's a shorter story at the end that deals with Jesus doing the second sign, which is healing the child from a distance. And the first story of the Jesus and the Samaritan woman, I think, is a good illustration to us that the Bible is always open to interpretation and multiple meanings. This story about Jesus and the Samaritan woman is really loaded down with significance. And in looking at the story, we probably don't do it justice if we just look for some sort of single thread of truth. And it may be, of course, a good argument as to why we go back and read the Bible over and over. Because each time we read it, we bring something different into it. And if nothing else, our own mood and experiences of the day will have us see and interpret scriptures in a different way than maybe we had before. It's not uncommon to read the scriptures and think to yourself, boy, I never saw it that way before. This is kind of a revelation to me. And the story about the Samaritan woman, I think, is one of these things that there are multiple themes involved. You know, there's the theme of racism, and I want to just, excuse me, I want to see if this is one of the writers doing that.
I have to read lips. I need a visual. I need to read lips.
Okay, I thought you didn't appreciate the humor.
Blocking my view.
You have the issue in this passage of racism or classism, because the Jews and the Samaritans, while not combatants in the military sense of things, did not like each other. And it was not a mutual dislike. It was the Jews looking down on the Samaritans as being less than. You also have the theme of sexism, because Jesus, being alone with a woman, caused the disciples to be a little alarmed. So there's that theme. There's the theme of the living water that Jesus wants to offer. And what does that mean to the woman and to us? Because if as we look at the story, what we find is that the woman comes to the well to draw water for the animals. But she does so at a time of day when normally they don't come. She does so when nobody else is there. And so she is probably carrying around a certain sense of embarrassment. She's had, 7 husbands? And probably is correct that when other people see her, they talk about her. They should probably talk about idiot number 7 what he was thinking, but she's going to get the blame for this. So she comes in a time of day when normally those coming to draw water do not come. And in doing so, is much like we talked about Nicodemus last week, coming to Jesus by night. She wants to come at a time when she's going to be less noticed. And probably most days is able to do this task in relative anonymity. But today, Jesus happens to venture by, and in doing so, actually has the audacity to ask the woman to draw water for him.
How does she know he's Jewish?
Well, he makes it a point. And the thing with the ancient Near East is there is a physical difference between the Jews and the Gentiles. And so it's probably noticeable through that. Also, this well that they go to is a Jewish well. And it may be that one of the reasons she avoids the prime time of coming to draw the water is because the other shepherds are Jewish. And she just doesn't fit in with that crowd. So there's that setup of, it may not just be that she looks at Jesus and says, "You're Jewish," but that pretty much everybody she knows is Jewish. And that creates a difficulty for her because she's, even if she had not had 7 husbands, just being Samaritan would put her under the Jews and would make her a less than. And I suppose that, it kind of falls in line with the emergence in our history of social justice movements where those who are oppressed not only are oppressed, but they don't have the energy to confront it directly. So they kind of stick to themselves. If you look at the early immigrants who came to America, they set up societies based on their heritage. There were assistance organizations specifically for Germans or English, and churches. A lot of the churches in colonial America and in the new country were ethnic oriented, the point of language, where they spoke the mother tongue. And so obviously if you had come from Cuba, you would not go to the Presbyterian church where they spoke German. That wouldn't work. So there was all this separate nature, and those that were in the perceived authority looked down on others. And I guess in looking at the early history of our country, it wasn't just that there was one group that was in and one group that was not in, but there were like gradations of almost a hierarchy of who was the best, and then who was the second best, and it worked down the scale until you got to people that just were not seen as being worth anything at all. And obviously, when you look at the slavery movement and even the emancipation, where African Americans were considered to be 1/2 in terms of the census. So we know that experience, and we know that experience today in many, many walks of life. The Harvard student is going to look down at the Northampton Community College student. The wealthy person is going to look down on the poor person. There still certainly is the racism, certainly systemically, and in many cases individually, that still plays out, and there's a looking down.
Is any of that division prominent in Israel today?
I think even more so. I think when you look at the Abraham-based religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, I think there really is a lot of tension. And the Middle East has been a powder keg for how long?
Oh, yeah.
Forever. And there was in particular, I think if you look from Jesus' time and you look at something like the woman at the well, where you have this separatism, it's not only a separatism of, oh, hi, I'm Samaritan, you're Jewish, but the woman even feels beaten down to the point almost where she is, in a way, conceding that Jesus shouldn't want to deal with her. That, what do Jews have to do with Samaritans? Not what do why do Samaritans look down on the Jews? It was kind of more, why do the Jews look down on the Samaritans? As we know from even the story of the good neighbor, where the priest and the Levite see the guy bludgeoned on the side of the road and walk on by, and the Samaritan comes and takes care of his wounds. And Jesus is lifting that up as a lesson of inclusion, of equality, of don't judge a book by its cover type of thing. So the woman is really faced with a dilemma here, because Jesus, in talking to her, not only is talking to her as a Jewish male, but he goes so far as to say, look, if you knew who you were talking to, you might think a little different. And in that way is another indication that Jesus in John's gospel is claiming special status. And again, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we have this thing called the Messianic secret, where Jesus does miracles and then tells his disciples they can't tell anybody. In John, this kind of stuff is completely different. It's like he has these interactions with people in order to proclaim that he is the Messiah. And in the second part of the chapter with the healing story, I mean, that's very clear. But even in the story of the woman at the well, it's implied, if you will, when he says, look, if you knew who you were talking to, you'd ask me for water, and I'd give you living water.
I'm only wondering how that must have taken her back, or what she was thinking when she said she had no husband, and Jesus went on to tell her history. As far as you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you had 5 husbands, and the man you are now you have is not your husband. That had to open her eyes, so to speak.
I would think that she would think something to the effect of, oh my God, my stuff's in the street.
and goodness, when you think Jesus can look at you and know your history, that's kind of really more than impressive.
Can you look at that and see how that, in that respect, the woman even cedes more power to Jesus than she thought he had to begin with? Now, the assumption is, I think, in this, is that the 5 husband deal is not perceived as a positive, right? So he's not bringing up something like, well, Samaritan woman, thank you for supporting the United Way this year. And there's a certain amount of power. I know people who I have told my deepest secrets to have potential power over me because they know stuff that maybe I don't want everybody else to know. And that's a lot of power. I mean, extortion, if you take it to the extreme, people extort. I was reading the text for a musical called Hamilton, about Alexander Hamilton. And there's an incident where he has a little fling with a woman from town, and the woman's husband writes him and basically says, for a little bit of money, nothing will be said, but if not, your wife's going to find out. Right? Power. So, it may very well be, though, that then when she goes back into town, she says to the people, this man told me everything about me. Now, one would assume that the townspeople may have already had this information. Again, because she went to the well at off hours. She obviously didn't have the camaraderie with the rest of the people who would need to draw water. Whether it be embarrassment, shame, guilt, whatever. She's carting with her. she's carting some pretty powerful stuff around with her. But think as well about, when someone has entrusted something with us, or we know something about somebody that maybe they've tried not to have disclosed, we may sense that we have a certain amount of one-upmanship on them. Right? I mean, hey, look, information is power. And if I have the right information, you can be at my beck and call if I choose to be, if I choose to be vindictive. And obviously she's concerned that at first that Jesus is going to use this against her. And he really doesn't. He tries to keep her engaged with him and not, he states these facts of her life. You've had 5 husbands and the one you're now with this. But he doesn't necessarily say it in a way of, and because of this you're going to hell. Right there. He doesn't attach consequences to it as much as he just is identifying something by which the woman will know that Jesus must be somebody really special, because he knows something about her that, quite frankly, out-of-towners don't know. So, does Jesus here, Jesus kind of provides a trick question or a trick statement, because he says to her, well, go and call your husband. And that gives her the opportunity to say, I have no husband. And that gives Jesus the opportunity to drop the bombshell.
Was that a test?
Was it? I don't know.
Well, he goes on to say that, yes, you're right, you have no husband. I mean, that's his divine power. He knew all about it before she even opened her mouth, evidently.
Was this interaction, it started with Jesus. Go call your husband. Go get your husband. Was he knowingly trying to set her up to be honest with him? And her honesty was not a lie. She didn't lie. She had no husband. But it wasn't going to the depths of the truth.
Did he maybe not want to set her up to go out and tell the people about him?
Well, I think one of the things that he does is, again, in John, he seems more open to wanting people to know. He's doing this, and he doesn't say to the woman, don't tell anybody that I know this about you. He just drops the bombshell and let her deal with it as she deals with it.
She says to him, I know, sir, you are a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, she goes to the people.
Yeah, so she identifies him as, now, does she, a prophet, identifying as the prophet and identifying as the Messiah are not necessarily the same things. And it's hard to really tell how much Samaritans place validity on Jewish prophets. Again, they're not populations that interact, so it's hard to say. Her response is very legitimate. I mean, obviously he knows this information, and she wants to be able to clarify why he knows it or how he knows it. Well, how does he know it? Well, because he must be a prophet. I think Jesus does try to take it a little further. So he's just not seen as one of the many prophets that wandered the land. And I'm sure that there were those who declared themselves prophets who were much like the faith healers who have healing services where before they begin, they have spies out in the lobby so they can find out who has a knee problem and who has this, and then the faith healer, for the podium. I can think that you have, because they managed to scope it all out. Jesus didn't have the opportunity to infiltrate the town and start asking about different people. So he definitely would have understood him to be a prophet. Because even the Jews, thank you, John, even the Jews would not be able, under any circumstances, to accept that Jesus would come into their town and start nosing around about people. That would be like somebody moving into East Bangor and immediately finding somebody who's a long-time resident and start saying, hey, what about this neighbor up the street? What do you think about them? What do you think about this guy? I saw this guy walking the other day. That sort of thing. Jesus has this knowledge divinely. And then goes out and shares that with her. Can we identify ourselves with the woman at the well somehow? Not necessarily that we've had 5 spouses, even if it has seemed that way at times, at the same time. But can we identify ourselves as having something that we would feel somewhat of religious significance might look at us, and if we knew that they knew, it would really be a bother to us? I mean, I think with me, yeah. I mean, there's just stuff that, quite frankly, I don't want you to know. And this was probably one of those things that she knew that the town knew, probably. But this out-of-towner, this Jew, who had no business being at the well when she was at the well, she didn't want that information disclosed. But he disclosed it, obviously. There's just a pile of connection possibilities in this for us. I had a guy, when I was in seminary, we would occasionally stay down in Madison. And there were 4 of us that we did a couple of motel rooms at this cheap dive. And Steve, and I can't remember Steve's last name, a real tall drink of water from Texas. And it didn't matter what it was that occurred. He would always say, I feel like the woman at the well. It was like, we were kind of suspicious that Steve's Bible only had John chapter 4. And the rest of it was quite painful. But anyway, he was able to really identify in a way where the rest of us were reading the story and picking out its meaning for the woman and for Jesus, and he was picking out the meaning for himself. And that to me was pretty deep. The difference between being a Christian disciple and simply a Bible scholar. You can be a Bible scholar without being a Christian. Let's face it, it's interesting literature. But we want to apply. And it goes on to say that this turned into an evangelism opportunity, because the woman went on to be an evangelist, much like Mary Magdalene at the empty tomb took what she saw and took it back to the disciples. The woman at the well takes what Jesus said to her and goes back to the people. She doesn't keep it quiet. She says to them, man, he knew a lot about me, and because of that, they believed. So it was an evangelism moment that came out of something that could have actually been harmful to the woman. Self-disclosure. I'm disclosing to you that Jesus told me stuff about me that we wouldn't normally know, or he shouldn't know. And because of that, they started to believe. So is there a theme of, sometimes it's when I feel that God convicts me, that instead of taking that as a moment of humiliation, I accept it with humility and I use it to be a witness in the world. Henry Nouwen called this concept the wounded healer. And the wounded healer is one that takes those things in their life that we might perceive as negatives and uses them to share the gospel. Instead of being so embarrassed that we may work really hard to keep those skeletons in the closet. That instead we acknowledge them. We acknowledge maybe our humanity, and we acknowledge that we felt God's forgiveness in spite of what we may have done.
Still learning to do it.
Well, it is, because once I see Margie,
See that all the time. Or see more. And we'll be here for another day.
have a good trip.
Thanks. See ya.
Once I disclose something to you, I can't take it back. I can't say, oh, you know what I told you? I was just kidding.
Hey, they've already put it on social media.
Yeah.
Breaking things. closed, they can't be pulled back. So anyone who's using their wounds or their embarrassments or the things that have humiliated them and is sharing them with others, they're out there. So people are, I am, a little tentative to necessarily want to share everything. And I'm wary of those who want to be an open book, especially when we're like with a stranger. And you get in those conversations where you're sitting there and saying, boy, this is more information than I need to know. You know? And you know, you're trying to get out of it, but you're sitting beside them on an airplane at 30,000 feet. You know, and you're really pondering whether jumping out the window is a good idea. So think about maybe over the week or next few days, a hurt, an embarrassment, a humiliation, and who you can share with that you trust. And can it be a positive in someone else's life? Can it be a means of sharing the good news? This incident at the well turned into an opportunity for the good news to be shared. And so often what we rely on is sharing good news that we think or say is really good news. You know, I was sick and now I'm well. I was broke and won the lottery. I don't know. I was being oppressed and I've been redeemed. You know, that's all good stuff. Not, man, I really messed up and, you know, I felt forgiven, but I'm telling you that I messed up. And so a lot of us find, in many cases, that if we have a spiritual friend, that we can develop a sense where not only can we share with them, but they can lovingly challenge us when they know that we're not being completely honest about something. Or we use a therapist, perhaps, with the assumption that what's said in the session stays in the session. But even with a situation like that, it takes a long time to develop the trust in somebody, to not only disclose our own stuff, but for them to call us on something. And for us to be able to accept what they say as being ultimately a statement of love and not condemnation.
Isn't this what psychiatrists are supposed to be about?
Well,
Or there's some out there that are not.
well, I think that there, you know, if you look at any sort of behavioral therapist, obviously there's some stuff that is purely medical, chemical imbalances and that sort of thing. And then with therapists, there may be those issues that are deep-seated in life that we just haven't had time processing. And we need a little help to be able to do it. And can't necessarily do it in a way of, I had a guy, and it really wasn't even that bad a situation, but he was pretty tied up. He was into padding his expense account, and to the tune of a few $100s a month. A lot of extra mileage that wasn't there. And
Was he from Chicago?
no, and he kind of told me about this after a few months. And I never disclosed it to anybody. I felt that it was a confidential matter, that if anyone should disclose that to his employer, it should be him.
And then you think, well, maybe you needed the money.
And maybe there are some things that it's best left. Look, I needed to vent this, but the reality is, if I go to my boss and say, look, I don't know how much it added up to, but a few $100s a month, and I get fired, well then I'm just multiplying the problem. Maybe my repentance is I just don't do it anymore, and try to leave it at that. I don't know. I know that I find I've had a situation where my therapist retired, so I've started over with the new one. I've seen her about maybe 4 or 5 times, and it's the start of this process again of developing trust, and she's not at the point where she's ready to call me on anything, and I'm disclosing things piecemeal with the idea of I'm going to see what your reaction is, and then we'll go from there. But it takes a long time, and that's where I think having a spiritual friend is a real asset, because you just develop things over time, and it becomes a mutual conversation. You share a little bit about yourself, they share a little bit about themselves. You both demonstrate that you are able to hear the realities of their life without getting up and running away. And the only thing we have to watch out for, especially I think with people who are apt to do too much information, is playing a game of can you top this? That, well, I wrote off $150 in excess mileage last month. Oh yeah? Well, I robbed the bank. Okay, you win.
What did the Samaritans, or who did the Samaritans worship?
The Samaritans were in large part, I would say, deists. That they understood there was a God, but they did not relate it to Judaism or certainly to Jesus. at that point. They worshipped in separate places. They stayed separate, and I think this goes back to the whole stuff that goes on in the Middle East, where you get these groups that lock in to their religion, and as they lock into their religion, it's with the understanding we are right, and therefore everybody else is wrong. And I am the cowboy in the black hat, or the white hat, and you're the bad guys, and we need to get rid of you to make our town pure. Big problem today, Christian nationalism. Like, whoa, it's a little scary that we think that we think that Christianity should rule the nation. It's not respectful of other religious traditions. And we can certainly adapt principles that are present in different religions and live peacefully, but we just choose not to do so. Or at least in the Middle East, they choose not to do so. And that's been the whole Christian, Islam, Judaism tension. It's centered around the same God, but it's looking at control of the same city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the home of all three, and it must be kind of like an urban area where there are gangs, and you have your turf, and you want to establish a little more turf, and so you do what you can with that. I want to move on to the next story, which is a very simple one. It starts in verse 46, where there's an official of the government whose son was ill, and Jesus heals the son from a distance, and in doing so, that becomes the sign of Jesus's Messiahship, the second sign of the seven in the Gospel of John. Pretty amazing. Jesus doesn't even have to lay hands. He just needs to say the word. And that's got to be a pretty powerful truth for all those folks to deal with when they see that and they understand that. The official wants to really nail this down. So he asks the servant when the son started to get better, and lo and behold, it was the same time that Jesus had said the word. So they're too much to be a coincidence. This wasn't the fact that the aspirin finally kicked in and the fever broke. This was a miraculous event that took place. We probably experience so many miracles that we don't recognize. And I suppose that maybe part of it is, if you look at one of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, we've talked about him. Jefferson was a rationalist and did his own Bible. And basically did a cut and paste job on the Gospels to where if something happened that was a miracle, he didn't include it. Because if it couldn't be explained, it couldn't have happened. That's rationalism. And there were a lot of rationalists back in the time. Ben Franklin was a rationalist. A lot of the early founding fathers, they were deists in that they believed in God, but they weren't willing to fully invest that Jesus had these special powers. And so they just cut and pasted. Now, probably we do the same thing with Bible passages by saying, well, that one I'm going to pay attention to, and this one I'm not. Here's the 10 Commandments. Well, if I get 9 out of 10, that's still B+. I'll take that as it is. But how do we understand miracles today? And how do we understand when miracles don't happen today? How do we understand Jesus said, ask and it shall be given to you, and we ask and it's not given to us? I mean, how do we process that kind of stuff? Do I look at Jesus and asking for things in Jesus' name as if I'm asking God, the cosmic Santa Claus, to answer my wish list? And when it doesn't happen, I'm really mad, upset, hurt, humiliated, angry, whatever emotion might come up. If Jesus would have said to the official, okay, I'll take care of things, you go home, and he goes home and his son's deceased, that's not going to fly. Unfortunately, we don't have any real examples in the Bible where Jesus indicated to someone, I really can't do that. That's outside of my ability. And if you look at some of the popular television preachers, some of them base a lot of their emphasis on we'll pray for you and you'll get what you want. And I'm surprised because I think I've raised before, and a lot of people didn't know about Reverend Ike, the money reverend. And Reverend Ike drove a Rolls Royce and said that God's desire for you was to be rich. Ike, like Ike and Tina Turner, but he wasn't Ike Turner. He was just Reverend Ike. He was out in New York.
He didn't last very long.
But he made a ton of money when he did last. And it was all based on God wants you to be rich, the prosperity gospel. That the miracle is going to happen. Richard Roberts, Oral Roberts' son, same deal. And they did one of those insider investigations and found out that when people mailed in their prayer request and a check, the prayer request went in the trash and the check got put in the bank. So, I think we are, in desperate times, we're susceptible to looking for the person who can provide the miracle or can make the miracle happen. As if Jesus will listen to Richard Roberts rather than you. All right, there's a mediator who has this power. And it's just more than, it's bogus. I mean, people who have been involved in miracles happening respond with humility, not bravado. There more is, wow, I can't believe God used me for that, rather than, well, look what I did. There's that big difference there. And humility is the official whose son was healed came to Jesus with a plea, not with a demand. Came to him in humility, not, yeah, you do this for me. You take care of this and you take care of it now. It's not that kind of approach. When we approach God with, here's what I want you to do, and here's the time frame I want you to do it in, and don't do it during, in our house at least, don't do it during Jeopardy. And disrupt me that way. So what are your thoughts?
God's the know-all, the be-all, and all you have to do is turn to Him with gratitude and do what you will.
Understanding there is a God and it ain't me.
I think the know-all is the best point out of this chapter, and I'm only repeating myself when I go back to how Jesus knew about the woman. And I think to keep that in the back of our minds, that there's nothing hidden from Christ is so important. We can hide things from each other, we can hide our feelings, but he knows. And if you keep that in mind,
can't hide your feelings from the Lord. You can't.
And I don't know about you, but I find that comforting.
yes.
Oh, yes.
You know, that it's one of those things that I don't have to put in the energy trying to keep something from it. It's okay. It is what it is. Because I know that there may be others that I use a lot of energy to not disclose something. But with Jesus, I can freely do it.
Pray for something you can't find where it works. You know that He already knows. He knows what you want to say.
Yeah.
You don't have to put up great lights. and
Right.
put it in
Oh,
words.
And even, I think, trusting that, again, some of those parts of our lives that we may not think are the greatest are still opportunities to reach out to others, even if we don't disclose. I mean, the woman did not say to the people in town, he told me that I had 5 husbands and the one I'm living with now is not my husband. She just said, he told me about my life. Yeah, and that was good enough.
Be interesting to hear your story.
It would be, wouldn't it? It'd be real interesting.
I think the Samaritans have their own wells.
The Samaritans had their own wells, but they also shared wells. So it was kind of a both and. And a lot of it would depend on how they were divided up geographically. You know, there were Samaritan ghettos, if you will. Much like we talked about early America, where there were, the Jews all congregated to one part of the city and the Germans to the other part of the city. They did so not because they necessarily intentionally wanted to position themselves as better than others, but let's face it, if everybody intermixed coming off of the boats from various countries, it would be like the Tower of Babel, trying to get anything done.
So Jacob's well was used by everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if Jesus ever got his drink. I don't think it ever goes on to say.
Well, he said he didn't need it, because he said if you knew who asked you for a drink, you would ask him and he would give you the living water.
Well, why did he ask you for a drink?
To open the conversation, kind of an icebreaker, a nicety, some small talk. He could have gone up to her and said, "Hey, some weather we're having, huh?"
I thought he was a typical male and just said, "Please, or give me a drink, please."
Well,
Or he could have said, "Wow, that well is really deep."
yeah. But he wouldn't say, "How about them Steelers?"
No, he wouldn't. Or how about them Phillies? But it is truly, a little off the subject, it is truly amazing to see what all the visitors to this country are seeing for themselves in our country that we take for granted. It really is amazing in how they interact and really appreciate everything. They can't get over that you get refills on water, at a restaurant. It is amazing what we take for granted, and others now are really enjoying.
And there's such a good spiritual connection there, because we take God for granted at times.
Oh, we do.
We take our faith life for granted. It becomes secondary if we get around to it or whatever. And I have to admit that on days in particular when I do not start with my devotions and prayers, I miss an awful lot of things that God does.
Oh,
Whereas if my mind is primed to be attentive to what's going on, it's amazing. I see what God is doing.
It even just puts you in the right mode to calm yourself down and be able to see what's out there. Whereas if you skip devotion, I find myself that you get into like a hectic role. You're just going through the motions of everything and not really being calm.
I think I have to do my devotions early in the morning, and once I do them, I figure in my mind the rest of the day is going to be okay. But if I don't start them early in the morning, something sidetracks me. My day goes off the rails. It really
I
does.
hear you. I think that's something that a lot of us experience. And even people whose life is off the rails.
Well,
You
even,
confront them with, you know, are you starting your day on the right foot? There's a commercial now with Dr. Phil for Relaxium Sunset Sleep product. And how people, they don't sleep because they're trying to solve unresolvable problems and da 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 da. And how many of those people, it's not that they need a good night's sleep, it's that they need a good morning waking up and a good start to their day. And the realization that, you know what, everything's going to be okay. It's maybe the message that I get out of the miracles is not that God's going to resolve all of my problems, but God's going to make it so everything will be okay. And that's good enough. You know, I may be broke this morning, and you know what, when I go to bed, I'm going to be just as broke, if not more so. But everything's okay. I had my meals. I have people who love and care about me. I have an opportunity to share my faith with others. You know, what more can I ask?
You know, it worked for Dr. Phil and Mike Huckabee.
And Mike Huckabee, yeah. And you know, they both want to give away 1,000 free bottles because they know it will work for us.
And laugh all the way to the bank.
Yes.
It must have worked, that must have worked for what's his name became the ambassador to Israel.
That's Huckabee, yeah.
Yeah, right. Of course, he-
Mike Huckabee also does a commercial for the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews.
Yes, he does.
He's
See?
on a roll.
Who knows, next thing we know, he'll be advertising Budweiser.
And Dr. Phil.
And Dr.
Oh, this is going to, we're out of hand now.
But the reality of it is, you know, if I want to start my day on a negative note, I'm guaranteeing that the rest of my day is going to be negative.
Oh, yes.
If I start my day on a positive note, if I start my day with the acknowledgement that God is there with me, man, we pretty much are able to tackle just about everything. And yeah, there are failures, and yes, there are griefs, and yes, there are disappointments, but we're okay.
to think about the prisoners in jail, and before they got there, I'll assume that they didn't know God and they didn't practice their faith, and they go to jail and basically they end up reading the Bible and going through it and becoming faithful. And you think, what would they have been like if they would have started that prior to? You know, but because they didn't have anything else to do, they turned to the Bible.
Yeah, I have a little volunteer gig I do at the prison once a month at North County. And I think one of the things that I really find with the inmates there are, you have those that are so locked up in their own arrogance that they're never going to get it. And you have those that really use the time for self-reflection and determining what are the important things in their lives, and God becomes important. I think part of the problem that we see with the correction system, with the recidivism, and the fact that a lot of people who get out go back in, is that they carry this arrogance with them. It's, why are you in jail? Because of those damn cops. You robbed a bank and they caught you. Well, yeah, how dare they? Boy, they should be out there ticketing speeders, not busting somebody who tried to make an honest day's labor by stealing other people's money.
Well, that's to the form that those people always think that it's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. And until you release that and accept that it was your fault, you're never going to.
And isn't there something beautiful about being able to look at a situation and say, I blew that? There is something so redeeming about being able to see something and say, I messed that up, but it'll be okay. I'll recover from it.
But I think you have to say, I messed that up, but with the Lord's help, I'm going to be okay.
It'll be okay, yeah. So, yeah, I think that, there are two choices that people who are incarcerated have to make. They can either retain their sense of arrogance and risk being in and out of jail through their adult life, or they can have a sense of humility and understand that God wants to take them in a healthier direction. And there's always that small percentage of the arrogant who all of a sudden find Jesus when there's a parole hearing coming up. And the minute parole's denied, they deny Jesus.
It's true.
Is kind of what it is. But there is something very healing about being able to admit our own faults and failures. That's healthy and celebrates our humanity. There's nothing more distressing than being stuck in a conversation with somebody who's perfect.
Oh, boy. I try to ignore them. Doesn't always work, but I try to ignore them.
I wondered why you weren't talking to me.
Oh, never tell. There's only one perfect, and that's the Lord. That's the way I look at it.
Now, next week, we're going to be taking a look at chapter 5, and in particular, we're going to be talking about the Sabbath, because there's a healing on the Sabbath, and we all know that that usually causes problems. And so we're going to take a look at Sabbath practices. So we'll do that next week. Also, looking ahead to the fall, I believe it's starting September 9th. September 9th, we're going to be doing a study on a book called Why? Making Sense of God's Will by Adam Hamilton. Adam Hamilton is the pastor of our largest United Methodist church in the country, Church of the Redeemer in Kansas, and also is now running for Senate, but we won't hold that against him. And the book, there are a couple options. The book is about $12, and it's available through Amazon and Cokesbury. Or I'll have something in the newsletter. If people want to order it through me by a certain date, I think August 15th, I can get them for 9.
Okay.
So we'll have, as we get closer to we're not going to reach summer away quite yet. And let's see,
What's Adam Hamilton's answer to why?
that's what we explore, because I don't think there's necessarily an answer.
Oh, he did not. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's an answer to and part of it, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily rely on Rabbi Kushner's book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People, but I can sense some inferences in it. Rabbi Kushner in that book, I don't think ever really draws the conclusion that some people would hope, which is a definite reason as to why bad things happen to good people. Obviously, we know that in Judaism, it was tied to sin. That, why am I sick? Well, it's because I sinned. Why, with Job, his friends are interrogating him as to, you must have done something, because that's why you're in such bad straits. But I think by and large, there's just not a definitive answer to the question. There are opportunities to speculate, but in terms of definitive. And when we talk about God's will, we're talking not only ourselves, but what's going on around us. And why is the world the way it is? Not just why are things happening to me. But anyway, we'll have more information in the newsletter about that. And then we'll go from there. Well, you all have a good week.
You too.